The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, like a metal flower blooming in the void of space. Station Helix 7 was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It stretched for miles in every direction, and its lights could be seen from planets 3 systems away. Today, it held the most important meeting in galactic history. Representatives from 32 alien species had gathered here to discuss peace and trade and the future of all living things. Ambassador Park. Jisoo stood near the back of the Great Hall and watched the aliens move around her. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and black hair that she kept tied back in a simple style. She wore the blue uniform of Earth Diplomatic Service and carried herself with quiet confidence. She had spent 15 years learning how to talk to beings from other worlds. She knew their customs and their fears and their hopes. But today she felt nervous in a way she had not felt in years. The reason for her nervousness held her hand and looked around with wide, curious eyes. Her daughter Yuna was only 7 years old. She had begged and pleaded and cried until Jisoo agreed to bring her to the summit. Yuna wanted to see real aliens. She wanted to see the space station. She wanted adventure. Jisoo had finally said yes because she could. Never resist those big brown eyes. Now she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Yuna tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed at a group of Veltari delegates. The Veltari were tall and thin with skin like pale blue glass. Their wings folded behind their backs and caught the light in beautiful patterns. They moved like dancers, even when they were just walking across a room. "Mommy, look at the pretty ones," Yuna whispered loudly. "They have wings like butterflies." Jisoo smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Those are the Veltari, sweetheart. They come from a world with very low gravity, so they evolved to fly. Can they fly here? Too, maybe in the low gravity sections of the station. But here they just walk like everyone else." Yuna nodded seriously, as if this was the most important information she had ever received. Then her attention jumped to another group of aliens. These were the Morkan, and they could not have been more different from the delicate Veltari. The Morkan were massive creatures covered in thick armor plates. They stood 8 feet tall and weighed as much as small vehicles. Their faces were hidden behind natural bone masks, and their voices sounded like rocks, grinding together. "What about those ones?" Yuna asked without any fear in her voice. "They look like dinosaurs. Those are the Morkan. They are very old and very wise. Their civilization existed before humans learned to make fire." "Are they nice?" Jisoo paused. She had dealt with the Morkan before. They were proud and stubborn and often looked down on younger species like humans. "But they were not cruel. They can be nice," she said carefully. "They just need time to get to know you." The Great Hall buzzed with conversation in 100 different languages. Translation devices hummed and clicked as they turned alien words into something everyone could understand. Servants from a dozen worlds carried drinks and food on floating platforms. Holographic displays showed maps and charts and data streams. It was organized chaos on a scale that only the galactic community could create. "Commander." Taiho Kim made his way through the crowd toward Jisoo. He was a tall man with a soldier's build and watchful eyes. He wore the black uniform of human security forces and carried himself like someone ready for trouble at any moment. Taiho had served with Jisoo's late husband in the Colonial Defense Fleet. After her husband died protecting a transport ship from pirates, Taiho had sworn to watch over his family. "Ambassador Kim," he said with a small bow. "The council is almost ready to begin the main session. Thank you, Commander. Any concerns I should know about?" Tae glanced around the room. His eyes never stopped moving. The usual tensions between the Drakthos and the Veltari. Some minor arguments about seating arrangements. Nothing unexpected. And the special exhibit. His voice dropped lower when he said those words. Jisoo felt a chill run down her spine. Despite the comfortable temperature of the station, The creature is secure in the lower observation dome. Full containment fields are active. The Council believes showing it to the delegates will demonstrate their power and encourage cooperation. Jisoo did not like it. She had argued against bringing the creature to the summit, but her voice was only one among thousands, and humans were still new to galactic politics. No one listened to the young species from the small blue planet Dot. Can we see the dragon? Both adults looked down at Yuna. The little girl was staring up at them with excitement shining in her eyes. Jisoo felt her heart skip a beat. How do you know about that, sweetheart? I heard the grown-ups talking. They said there is a real dragon here. A space dragon? Can we see it, please? Please, Taya and Jisoo exchanged worried looks. The creature in the observation dome was not something a child should see. It was not something anyone should see. But word had spread through the station, and soon everyone would know about it. The council has arranged a viewing for all delegates later today, Taiho said slowly. It will be perfectly safe. The containment fields could hold a small sun. Jisoo knelt down to look her daughter in the eyes. You know what they have down there is very dangerous. It is not like the dragons in your storybooks. This is a real creature that has hurt many people. But I want to see it. I have never seen a real dragon before. The sadness in Yuna's voice was real. Jisoo remembered being young and curious and wanting to see everything the universe had to offer. She remembered when fear had not yet taught her to be careful. We will see, she said finally. If you promise to stay close to me and do exactly what I say. I promise, I promise. The summit continued around them. Alien diplomats discussed treaties and trade routes and ancient grudges. But Jisoo could not focus on any of it. Her mind kept drifting to the observation dome below them. She had seen images of the creature. Everyone had. It was called a crimson void worm, and it was the most dangerous living thing ever discovered. The worm was named Paraxis. It had destroyed 17 colonies across 3 star systems before the combined fleets of 12 species finally captured it. Thousands had died in those attacks. Entire worlds had been burned to ash. The creature breathed plasma hot enough to melt starship armor. Its scales were harder than any known material. Its eyes held an intelligence that made scientists argue about whether it was merely an animal or something more. And now it was here on Station Helix 7, chained and contained, and displayed like a trophy. The Council wanted to show the galaxy that nothing was beyond their control, that even the nightmares of space could be conquered. Jisoo looked down at her daughter. Yuna had found a small alien child to play with. They did not speak the same language, but they had found a way to communicate through gestures and laughter. The alien child had 3 eyes and purple skin, but Yuna did not seem to notice or care. That was the thing about human children. They did not see monsters where adults saw threats. They did not feel fear where older hearts felt terror. They looked at the universe with open eyes and open hearts and saw only wonder. Jisoo hoped that innocence would never change. She hoped the universe would be kind to her daughter. She did not know that in just a few hours everything would change. She did not know that her little girl would do something that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. She did not know that the deadliest creature in the universe was about to meet the one thing it could not destroy. A 7-year-old girl with no fear and a heart full of love. The observation dome was located in the deepest section of Station Helix 7. To reach it, the delegates had to travel through 3 security checkpoints and 2 airlocks. Armed guards from 6 different species stood at every entrance. Scanning. Devices checked every visitor for weapons and recording devices and anything else that might cause trouble. The council was taking no chances. Yuna held her mother's hand tightly as they walked through the final corridor. The walls here were made of something that looked like black glass. Strange lights pulsed behind the surface like slow heartbeats. The air felt heavy and warm, despite the climate control systems. Everything about this place said danger in a language that needed no translation. "I do not like it here," a Voltari delegate whispered to her companion. "This feels wrong. We should not have brought that creature here." "The council knows what they are doing," another Voltari replied. "The containment fields are the strongest ever built. Nothing can break through them. But should we be keeping such a thing at all? Some creatures were never meant to be caged." Jisoo heard their conversation and felt her own doubts grow stronger. She looked down at Yuna and saw that her daughter was not afraid. The little girl was looking around with bright, curious eyes. She was excited. She was eager. She had no idea what waited for them at the end of this corridor. Commander Taiho walked ahead of them. His hand rested near his weapon, even though he knew it would be useless against what lay ahead. Old habits died hard, especially for soldiers who had seen too much death. He had watched the recordings of Paraxis attacking colonies. He had seen the creature tear through defense fleets like they were made of paper. He knew exactly how powerless they all were. The corridor opened into a massive circular room. The observation dome stretched above them like a giant eye looking down at the universe. But no one looked up at the stars. Every eye in the room was fixed on what lay below. The viewing platform hung over a containment chamber the size of a small city. Energy fields crackled and hummed around the edges. Warning lights blinked in patterns that meant danger in every known language. And there in the center of it all lay Paraxis, the crimson void worm. The creature was even more terrifying in person than any image could show. 400 meters of living nightmare stretched across the chamber floor. Its scales were black as the space between stars, with veins of deep red running through them like rivers of fire. Each scale was larger than a human being. Each claw could tear through metal like cloth. Its tail alone was longer than most starships. Paraxis was sleeping. Its massive eyes were closed and its breathing came slow and deep. Each breath sent waves of heat rippling through the containment field. Each exhale made the energy barriers flicker with strain. Even in sleep, the creature radiated power that made every living thing in the room want to run by the stars the Morkan High Commander breathed. His voice had lost all its usual confidence. "I have led armies into battle against the worst the galaxy has to offer. But I have never felt fear like this, Dot. It destroyed my home world," a Drakthos warrior said quietly. The Drakthos were proud and fierce and feared nothing. But this warrior's hands were shaking. "I was just a child. I watched from an escape pod as it burned everything I knew to ash. I still see it in my dreams." Yuna pulled at her mother's hand. "Mommy, why is everyone so scared?" "It is just sleeping." Jisoo knelt down beside her daughter. Her voice was gentle but serious. "That creature has hurt many people, sweetheart. Everyone here has a reason to be afraid of it. But it is not hurting anyone now. It is just lying there. It looks tired." The innocence in Yuna's voice made Jisoo's heart ache. She did not know how to explain the weight of grief and terror that filled this room. She did not know how to tell her daughter about the thousands who had died, about the worlds that would never recover, about the nightmares that haunted survivors across the galaxy. "Some things are dangerous, even when they are sleeping," she said finally, "like a fire that could spread at any moment. We have to be careful." Yuna looked back at the worm. Her eyes were thoughtful in a way that surprised her mother. She seemed to be studying the creature, looking for something that no one else could see. The council representative stepped forward to address the gathered delegates. He was a being made of pure energy contained in a special suit. His voice echoed through translation devices across the room. "Honored delegates, you see before you the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. The crimson void worm, known as Paraxis, has brought death and destruction to countless worlds. But today we show you that even this monster can be contained. Even this nightmare can be controlled. The Galactic Council protects all who live under its authority. The speech continued, but Yuna was not listening. She had noticed something that made her small heart hurt. The worm was sleeping, but it was not peaceful. Its massive body twitched and trembled. Sounds came from its throat that were too quiet for the adults to hear. But Yuna heard them. They sounded like crying. The little girl looked around the observation platform. She saw fear on every face. She saw hatred in many eyes. She saw the guards with their weapons pointed at the creature below. No one was looking at the worm with kindness. No one was seeing what she saw, a creature in pain. A being that was scared and alone and surrounded by enemies. Yuna made a decision in that moment. It was not a logical decision. It was not a safe decision. But she was 7 years old, and her heart was bigger than her sense of danger. She saw something that needed help, and she wanted to help it. She waited until her mother was distracted by a conversation with another delegate. She watched as Commander Taiho moved away to check on his security team. Then she slipped her hand free and began to move through the crowd. No one noticed the small human girl making her way toward the edge of the platform. No one saw her duck under a safety barrier. No one watched as she found an access panel on the wall and began to study the buttons with curious eyes. The Morkan technician who had set up the security systems was confident in his work. He had built containment fields that could hold small stars. He had created barriers that nothing could break. But he had made one small mistake. He had left an emergency access panel unlocked because he never imagined anyone would be foolish enough to use it. Yuna did not know she was being foolish. She did not know she was doing something that every adult in the room would have stopped. She only knew that there was a sad creature below and a door that might let her reach it. She pressed a button. Alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across the entire observation dome. The energy barriers around the access corridor flickered and died. Emergency announcements blared in a dozen languages. Guards shouted and drew weapons. Delegates screamed and ran for the exits. Containment breach in Sector 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Jizu's heart stopped. She spun around looking for her daughter. The crowd was chaos. Bodies pushed and shoved in every direction. She could not see Yuna anywhere. Yuna, she screamed. Yuna, where are you? Commander Taiho was already moving. His soldier's instincts had kicked in before his mind fully understood what was happening. He pushed through the panicking crowd toward the access corridor. Toward the place where a small human girl had just done the impossible. Below them, in the containment chamber, Paraxis opened its eyes. The worm's gaze swept across the chaos above. Ancient intelligence burned in those massive orbs. Power beyond mortal understanding stirred in its blood. It had been captured. It had been chained. It had been displayed like a trophy for lesser beings to gawk at die, and now something small was coming toward it. Paraxis watched as a tiny figure walked down the access corridor. The creature was so small, so fragile, so utterly defenseless. The worm could destroy it with a single breath. It could burn it to nothing without even trying. But something made Paraxis pause. Something in the way the small creature moved. There was no fear in its steps, no hesitation, no trembling. The tiny thing was walking toward the deadliest creature in the galaxy, like it was approaching a friend. Paraxis had never experienced anything like this before. The access corridors stretched before Yuna like a tunnel into another world. Emergency lights painted everything in shades of red. Alarms screamed above her head in sounds that hurt her ears. But she kept walking. Her small feet carried her forward, step by step, toward the creature that waited at the end. The containment chamber was bigger than anything Yuna had ever seen. It was bigger than her school. Bigger than the park where she played. Bigger than anything she could have imagined. And in the center of all that space lay Paraxis. The worm had lifted its head from the ground. Its eyes tracked the tiny human as she walked closer. Each eye was larger than Yuna herself. They glowed with inner fire that shifted between red and gold in colors that had no names in any human language. They held intelligence and power and something else. Something that Yuna recognized because she had seen it before. Loneliness on the observation platform above chaos had given way to frozen terror. The delegates who had not fled stood pressed against the barriers. They watched the scene below with the horrified fascination of beings witnessing the impossible. None of them could move. None of them could speak. They could only watch and wait for the inevitable. Ambassador Jisoo had pushed her way to the front of the crowd. Her hands gripped the barriers so hard that her knuckles had turned white. Tears streamed down her face. Her mouth formed her daughter's name over and over, but no sound came out. Commander Taiho stood beside her. His weapon hung forgotten at his side. He had seen combat. He had watched friends die. He had faced horrors that would break lesser beings. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could prepare anyone for watching a child walk towards certain death. "We have to do something," he managed to say. His voice cracked on every word. "We have to stop this." The Morkan High Commander shook his massive head. "There is nothing to be done. The access corridor is sealed from both ends. By the time we break through, the child will be dead. Then we break through anyway," Taiho shouted. "We have to try." But no one moved. No one could move. The fear was too strong. The certainty of death was too complete. They all knew what Paraxis could do. They had all seen the recordings of burning worlds and melting fleets. One small human child had no chance at all. Below them, Yuna had reached the end of the corridor. She stepped out onto the floor of the containment chamber and looked up at the creature before her. Paraxis towered over her like a mountain of scales and fire. Its breath washed over her in waves of heat that should have burned her skin. Its presence pressed down on her like the weight of a dying star. Any other being would have collapsed under that presence. Any other creature would have been crushed by the sheer force of the worm's existence. But Yuna just stood there and looked up with wonder in her eyes. "Hello," she said. Her voice was small, but it did not shake. "My name is Yuna. Do you have a name?" Paraxis stared at her. In all its long existence, nothing like this had ever happened. Beings ran from it. Beings fought it. Beings died before it. But no being had ever simply walked up to it and asked for its name. The worm's great head lowered slowly. It moved with a care that seemed impossible for something so massive. Its snout came down until it was level with the tiny human. Hot breath washed over Yuna and ruffled her black hair. Eyes like burning suns studied her with ancient curiosity. "You are big," Yuna said matter-of-factly. "The biggest thing I have ever seen. But you do not look mean. You look sad." "Why are you sad?" On the platform above, the Voltari ambassador clutched her companion for support. "How is she still alive? Why has it not killed her yet?" No one had an answer. No one could explain what they were seeing. It defied everything they knew about the creature. Everything they knew about the universe itself. Paraxis made a sound. It was not a roar. It was not a growl. It was something softer. Something that rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. The xenobiologists watching would later spend years analyzing that sound. They would write thousands of papers about its meaning. But Yuna understood it immediately. The dragon was talking to her. "I do not understand your words," Yuna said. "But that is okay. My mommy says that sometimes we do not need words to understand each other. She says that kindness speaks all languages." The little girl reached out her hand. It was such a small hand. Tiny fingers spread wide. A palm no bigger than one of the worm's scales. She stretched toward the massive snout before her without any hesitation at all. Every being on the observation platform held their breath. Time seemed to stop. The universe itself seemed to pause and watch. Yuna's hand touched Paraxis, her palm pressed against the black scales that had torn through starship hulls. Her fingers rested on the snout that had breathed fire hot enough to melt planets. She felt warmth beneath her touch. Not burning heat, but gentle warmth like sunlight on a summer day. "You feel nice," Yuna said with a smile. "Your scales are smooth like the rocks in Mommy's garden." "I like them." Paraxis closed its eyes. Another sound came from its throat. This one was different. It was softer and deeper, and seemed to vibrate through the very air. The scientists would later identify it as something that had never been recorded before. The worm equivalent of a purr. "I knew you were not mean," Yuna continued. She patted the great snout like she was petting a dog. "Everyone is scared of you, but you are not scary at all. You are just lonely. I know what lonely feels like. After my daddy went away, I felt lonely too. But Mommy says that lonely goes away when you find friends." The worm's eyes opened again. They were different now. The burning fury that had always filled them had faded. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked almost like hope. "Do you want to be my friend?" Yuna asked. "I have never had a dragon friend before. It would be really, really cool." Paraxis made another sound. This time, it was unmistakable. The creature was saying yes. On the platform above, Ambassador Jisoo finally found her voice. She screamed her daughter's name with all the power her lungs could produce. The sound echoed through the chamber and reached the little girl below. Yuna looked up and waved. "Mommy, mommy, look. The dragon wants to be my friend. Is that okay? Can I keep it?" Jisoo could not answer. She was crying too hard. But they were no longer tears of fear. They were tears of something else entirely. Relief and wonder and pride and love all mixed together into something she could not name. Commander Taiho fell to his knees. His shoulders shook with sobs he could not control. He had sworn to protect this family. He had been ready to die trying to save this child. And now he was watching her do something that should have been impossible. "She did it," he whispered. "She actually did it. She made friends with a god of destruction." The Morkan High Commander stood frozen in place. His ancient mind could not process what his eyes were showing him. In all the long history of his species, nothing like this had ever occurred. A child, a human child, had done what all the armies of the galaxy could not do. She had tamed the untamable. Below them, Yuna had climbed up onto Paraxis' snout. She sat there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her small legs dangled over scales that could survive the heart of a star. Her hands patted the worm's head in gentle rhythms. "You're going to like being my friend," Yuna told Paraxis. "I will visit you every day. I will bring you snacks." "Do dragons like snacks?" "I bet you do. Everyone likes snacks. And I will tell you stories. I know lots of good stories. Mommy reads them to me every night." Paraxis rumbled contentedly. For the first time in its long existence, it felt something other than rage and hunger and loneliness. It felt warmth that had nothing to do with the plasma in its blood. It felt peace that had nothing to do with destruction. It felt love. And somewhere in its ancient heart, something changed forever. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself could travel. Every communication network carried the story. Every news channel showed the footage. Every being in every system watched in disbelief as a 7-year-old human girl sat on top of the most dangerous creature in existence and laughed. The video had been recorded by 17 different news drones. Each angle showed the same impossible scene. A tiny child with black hair and bright eyes sitting on the snout of Paraxis the Crimson Void Worm, her small hand patting scales that had destroyed worlds. Her voice chattering happily about stories and snacks, while the creature beneath her purred, like a giant cat. And then came the moment that would be replayed billions of times across the galaxy. The moment that would be studied and debated and wondered at for generations to come. Yuna leaned forward and kissed Paraxis on the nose. It was a simple kiss, the kind a child might give to a beloved pet or a favorite stuffed animal. But that simple act sent shockwaves through every civilization that witnessed it, because it showed something that no one had ever believed possible. The deadliest creature in the universe could be gentle. On Station Helix 7, the chaos had finally begun to settle. Emergency crews had found ways to safely extract Yuna from the containment chamber. But they had discovered something unexpected. Paraxis would not let them take her alone. Every time they tried to lead the girl away, the worm moved to follow. When they sealed the access corridor, the creature's eyes tracked Yuna through the walls like nothing could hide her. From its sight, she has bonded with it, the lead xenobiologist reported to the council. Her voice trembled as she read from her datapad. The worm is imprinted on her somehow. It sees her as family, as pack, as something worth protecting rather than destroying. How is that possible? The council representative demanded. His energy form flickered with agitation. The creature has no capacity for such emotions. Every study ever conducted showed it was purely an engine of destruction. The xenobiologist shook her head. Every study was conducted on a creature that was hunted and attacked and imprisoned. No one ever tried to simply be kind to it. No one ever thought that was possible. Ambassador Jisoo sat in a small room off the main council chamber. Yuna was curled up on a couch beside her, fast asleep. The excitement of the day had finally caught up with the little girl. But even in sleep she smiled. Her dreams were full of dragons and adventures and new friends. Taiho stood guard by the door. He had not left their side since Yuna was brought up from the containment chamber. His face was tired, but his eyes held something new. Pride, maybe. Or wonder. He had served humanity for 30 years and thought he understood what his species was capable of. Now he realized he had barely scratched the surface. A knock came at the door. Taiho checked his scanner before opening it. The Morkan High Commander stood in the corridor. He had to duck his massive head to look through the doorway. His armored body barely fit in the frame. "May I enter?" he asked. His voice was quieter than Jisoo had ever heard it, more respectful. She nodded and gestured to a chair that had been designed for beings of his size. The Morkan settled into it with a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his ancient soul. "I have lived for over 3,000 years, he said slowly. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die and be born again. I have witnessed wonders that would drive lesser minds to madness. But I have never seen anything like what your daughter did today." Jisoo looked at her sleeping child. She was so small, so fragile, so utterly ordinary in so many ways. And yet she had done something extraordinary. "She does not see the world the way we do," Jisoo said. "She sees what could be instead of what is. She sees friends instead of enemies. She sees hope instead of fear." The Morkan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice held something that surprised Jisoo. It held shame. "We have been so afraid for so long. We discovered Paraxis centuries ago. We lost worlds to its fury. We lost millions of our people to its flames. And our response was to hunt it, to capture it, to chain it and display it like a trophy." He paused and his massive hands clenched into fists. "We never once considered that it might be afraid too, that it might be lonely, that it might just need someone to show it kindness." The Voltari ambassador appeared in the doorway. Behind her stood representatives from a dozen other species. They all wore the same expression. Shock mixed with newfound understanding. "We have spent millennia fighting," the Morkan continued. "Species against species. World against world. We built weapons and armies and fleets. We created containment fields and prison stations and execution chambers. And a human child with no weapons at all accomplished more than all of it combined. Taiho stepped forward. He had been listening silently, but now he felt compelled to speak. That is what humans do. It is what we have always done. We look at wolves and see dogs. We look at horses and see partners. We look at the deadliest predators on our world and see friends waiting to be made. But how the Voltari ambassador asked, how can you not feel fear when facing something that could destroy you? We feel fear, Jisoo said. She brushed a strand of hair from Yuna's sleeping face. We feel it deeply. But we have learned that fear does not have to control us. We can feel afraid and still choose to reach out. We can feel terror and still choose to love. The room fell silent. Every alien present was processing something their species had never truly understood about humanity. It was not that humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced. It was that they had a capacity for hope that bordered on insanity. A willingness to believe in connection, even when facing certain death. What happens now? The Drakthos warrior asked. She was the one who had lost her home world to Paraxis. Her voice was rough with emotions she could barely control. The creature destroyed everything I loved. How am I supposed to accept that it is now the pet of a human child? Jisoo met the warrior's eyes without flinching. She saw the pain there, the grief that had never healed, the rage that had sustained this being through countless battles. I cannot tell you how to feel, she said gently. I cannot undo what was done to your world. But I can tell you this. My daughter did not befriend a monster. She befriended a being that was made into a monster by loneliness and fear and endless violence. What Paraxis did was terrible. What was done to Paraxis was also terrible. Maybe it is time to break that cycle. The Drakthos warrior stared at her for a long moment. Then something in her expression shifted. The rage did not disappear, but it made room for something else. Something that might eventually become acceptance. Your child, she said slowly. She is remarkable. She is human, Jisoo replied. We are all capable of this. We have just forgotten how. On the couch, Yuna stirred in her sleep. Her small voice mumbled something about dragons and snacks and being best friends forever. The aliens in the room watched her with new eyes. They saw not just a human child, but a symbol of something they had lost long ago. The courage to love what they feared. The wisdom to see past the surface to the heart beneath. The simple, powerful truth that kindness was stronger than any weapon ever made. And somewhere, deep in Station Helix 7, Paraxis waited. The great worm lay quiet in its chamber. Its eyes were closed, but it was not sleeping. It was listening. Its ancient senses could hear the heartbeat of one small human girl. Through miles of metal and stone, it could feel the bond that had formed. Between them, it could feel something it had not felt in thousands of years. It could feel hope. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. The galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened on Station Helix 7. Scientists wrote papers. Philosophers debated meanings. Military strategists quietly rewrote their assessment of humanity from manageable threat to approach with extreme caution. But for Yuna, it was simply life as usual. Except now her usual life included a 400-meter dragon who followed her everywhere like a loyal puppy. The Galactic Council had tried to separate them. They had argued and debated and issued declarations. They had insisted that Paraxis was too dangerous to be left in the care of a child. But every time they tried to move the worm away from Yuna, the creature became agitated. Not violent, not destructive, just deeply, deeply sad. And somehow a sad dragon was even more terrifying than an angry one. In the end, they reached a compromise. Yuna was appointed the first human worm ambassador. It was a made-up title for a made-up position, but it gave her official status. More importantly, it meant she could stay with Paraxis legally. Ambassador Jisoo had taken a leave of absence from her regular duties to support her daughter. She traveled with Yuna from station to station as they showed the galaxy something unprecedented. The deadliest creature ever known, following a 7-year-old girl like a faithful hound, milking at her belly rubs. Chasing toys she threw across cargo bays, curling around her protectively when she napped. The images spread across every network. Paraxis catching a ball in its massive jaws. Paraxis letting Yuna paint flowers on its scales. Paraxis making that deep purring sound whenever the little girl hugged its snout. Each image chipped away at centuries of fear and hatred. Commander Taiho had become their permanent security escort. Not because Yuna needed protection from Paraxis, but because the galaxy still held beings who saw the worm as a threat to be destroyed. There had been 3 assassination attempts in the first month alone. All of them had failed, partly because of Taiho's vigilance, partly because Paraxis could sense danger before it arrived. The would-be assassins had been terrified to discover that the creature knew they were coming, that it had positioned itself between them and Yuna before they even drew their weapons, that its eyes had promised destruction beyond imagining. If they took one step closer, they had surrendered immediately. Now, Taiho walked beside Jisoo through the corridors of Station Harmony. This was the newest diplomatic outpost in the galaxy. It had been built specifically to house visiting delegations who wanted to meet Yuna and Paraxis. The waiting list was 3 years long. She has changed everything, Taiho said quietly. He watched through a viewport as Yuna played in the station's garden dome. Paraxis was curled around the space like a living wall. Its tail swayed gently as Yuna chased butterflies that the station had imported from Earth. Not just for the galaxy. For us, for how other species see humanity. Jisoo nodded. She had seen the changes firsthand. Species that had dismissed humans as young and primitive now looked at them with new respect. Not because humans were stronger or more advanced, but because they had demonstrated something rare in the galaxy. The courage to love what others feared. Before your daughter, the Morkan High Commander said, as he approached them. Other species saw humans as curiosities. Small soft beings from a small wet world. Now they see you as something else entirely. And what is that? Jisoo asked. The Morkan was quiet for a moment. His ancient eyes watched Yuna as she tried to convince Paraxis to chase butterflies with her. The great worm obliged by puffing tiny jets of warm air to make the insects dance in patterns that delighted the child. You are the species that befriends monsters, he said finally. You are the ones who see past fear to find connection. You are proof that the universe does not have to be defined by violence and destruction. His voice grew heavy with something like regret. We Morkan pride ourselves on our wisdom. We have lived for eons and seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But we never learned what a human child knows instinctively. What is that? Taiho asked. That kindness is the greatest power of all. In the garden dome, Yuna had climbed onto Paraxis' head. She sat between the great horns that crowned the worm's skull and pointed at different stars visible through the transparent ceiling. That one is Sol, she told her dragon friend. That is where Earth is, where I was born. Maybe someday I can take you there. You would like it. There are oceans and mountains and forests, and so many animals. I bet you would want to be friends with all of them. Paraxis made a sound that Yuna had learned meant agreement. The worm shifted slightly to give her a better view of the stars. Its movements were always careful around her, always gentle, as if it understood how fragile she was and treasured her all the more for it. Yuna leaned against one of the horns and sighed happily. I am glad you are my friend. Some of the adults still look at you like you are scary, but I know you are not. You are just big. Being big does not mean being mean. The worm closed its eyes. That purring sound rumbled through its massive body. Yuna felt the vibration like a warm hug that surrounded her completely. My daddy would have liked you, she said softly. He was brave like you. He protected people. Mommy says he died saving a whole ship full of families. She was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I miss him so much it hurts. But then I remember what Mommy told me. She said that love never really goes away. It just changes shape. Yuna placed her small hand on the warm scales beneath her. I think maybe that is why we found each other. Maybe all the love you were missing and all the love I was missing found a way to connect us. Does that make sense? Paraxis opened its eyes. Those ancient orbs that had seen the birth and death of stars looked at the tiny human with something that transcended words, understanding, gratitude, love. I knew you would understand, Yuna said with a smile. Below them, Ambassador Jisoo watched her daughter commune with a creature that had once been the terror of the galaxy. She thought about everything that had happened, everything that had changed, everything that was still to come. Other species had already begun to approach their own feared creatures differently. Reports came in every week about new attempts at connection instead of conflict. Not all of them succeeded. Many ended in failure or tragedy. But some worked. And each success proved that what Yuna had done was not a miracle. It was a possibility that had always existed. The universe just needed to be reminded. Commander Taiho appeared at her side. A message just came through from Earth. The Global Council wants to know when you and Yuna will be returning home. Jisoo smiled. Home. Such a small word for such a big concept. She looked at her daughter sitting happily on the head of a dragon. She looked at the stars stretching endlessly in every direction. She looked at the future that was unfolding before them. Tell them we will come home when our work here is done, she said. But also tell them to prepare a very large space. We will be bringing a friend. Taiho laughed. It was the first time Jisoo had heard him laugh since her husband died. The council is not going to like that. The council will adapt. That is what we humans do. We change the universe around us by refusing to accept that things have to stay the way they are. In the Garden Dome, Yuna had begun telling Paraxis a story. It was one her mother used to read to her about a brave knight and a friendly dragon. The worm listened with complete attention. Its tail swayed gently as the story reached exciting parts. Its eyes sparkled when the knight and dragon became friends. When the story ended, Yuna yawned widely. Being an ambassador is hard work, she mumbled. Even if it is the best job ever. She curled up against the warm scales beneath her. Paraxis carefully adjusted its position to create a protected space around her. The great worm would not sleep. It would watch over her through the night. It would keep her safe from anything that might threaten her. Dreams, because she had done something that no one else in the galaxy had thought to do. She had looked at a monster and seen a friend. She had reached out with love. Instead of fear. She had shown the universe that even the darkest nightmares could be transformed by the simple act of kindness. And in doing so, she had changed everything. Not just for one dragon, not just for humanity, but for every being who would ever look at something terrifying and wonder what might happen if they chose to love it instead. That was the gift of a 7-year-old girl. That was the power of a human heart. That was the story that would be told across the stars for as long as stories were told. The tale of Yuna and her dragon. The tale of the kiss that saved the galaxy. The end.